Hi, everyone. We're excited to kick off our next event as part of CPO Mastery Series conference. And we're thrilled to have Marty Cagan, who is a partner at SVPG. Marty does not need any introduction, and we're so excited to hear his talk. Marty will be talking about product leadership is hard and based on his new book, which is required reading for every single product manager and product leader. Marty, I'll have you take it away.
All right, thanks very much, Mo, and thanks for inviting me to the conference. Yes, so what I wanted to talk about is product leadership. Most of you probably know a little bit about who I am, so I don't need to spend a lot of time, but I have been doing tech products for a long time, and my biases, you can see where they come from. I started as an engineer. I did that for a lot of my career. And then I got more interested in product and product leadership. But I've done the product management, product design, and engineering components and the leadership of all of those. So that's sort of where I come from. That's my world. And really for quite a few years now, I've just been working with startups and growth stage companies all over the world and sharing what I learned, basically. And my focus of all my work really is trying to share with companies all over the world the techniques and practices I see used at the best companies in the world. And that is, I will say, there is a big difference between how the best companies work and how the rest work. And I really would like to try to close that gap. And so that's really what I talk about in all my talks, one level or another. Now, mostly what I talk about is how strong product teams solve hard problems in ways customers love that works for your business. It really is my favorite topic. I don't seem to ever tire of talking about that topic because the techniques are constantly evolving and getting better. And I just think there's so much good stuff to talk about and to share and to learn in how product teams work. But one of the things that I really learned with the release of the second edition of Inspired, which had a big publisher that really got it all over the world. And I realized that in many companies, the teams were loving the techniques on how to do this product work, but they were telling me that their management was not letting them work this way. And that was a shock to me. It's like, how in the world, why in the world? We're talking about why wouldn't you work like the best companies in the world do? It's not like they're not making boatloads of money. They are. They are literally not also the most valuable companies in the world. So it's pretty shocking why they wouldn't. But of course, I understand a lot of the dynamics about why. Most of the leaders have never seen it done well. They've never worked at one of those companies. They're also sort of scared of what that means to really be a technology-powered company. They don't get that. So, all right, what I realized was I needed to focus more on the leaders because the leaders are really the ones that either make this happen or not. So for the last really 2 years, I have been focused on writing and speaking to the leaders. And yes, the new book reflects really 2 years of that effort. And that's really what I'm talking about here. What I'm summarizing is I want to try to provide you with a high-level overview of the role of product leadership at a good product company. Now, I do talk to a lot of leaders at these other companies, the ones that are not so good. And the first thing is they often think that the way to have empowered teams is literally just to get the management to back off and let them do their job. But of course, I try to explain to them that, first of all, that's naive. And second of all, it's not true. It's not true. And in fact, the real key here is empowered product organizations don't require less leadership. They require better leadership. And then I explain to them what is involved with being a leader, a product leader at a real product company. And they're usually pretty shell-shocked because first of all, they had no idea they were supposed to be doing these things. And second, they're like, wow, how do I learn how to do these things? Even if I, want to. This is a very difficult job. And it is. So I'm not going to shy from that. It is a hard job. I'm going to try to spend this time to give you a high level overview of what the job is of a product leader. And then to give you a sense of, first of all, how important it is that you do these things. And second, that it is hard and why it's hard. All right, so the foundation of all this, just very quickly, is this idea of empowered product teams. And just to make sure we're on the same page, when we say an empowered product team, the purpose of an empowered product team is to serve customers in ways the customers love, but work for our business. Now, that's in contrast to most companies where the purpose of the teams is actually to serve the business. So you'll see a very stark contrast right there. Similarly, an empowered product teams are given customer or business problems to solve rather than features and projects to build. So in feature teams, they're given a roadmap of features and say, build this. You get this stuff out this quarter. In an empowered product team, they're instead given some problems to solve. They might be customer problems, they might be business problems, sometimes they're both, but they are hard and worthy problems to solve. And then they are empowered to actually discover and deliver a solution to those problems. That's really the litmus test for an empowered product team. They get to figure out the best way to do it versus a feature team where they're just told to implement these features. And then unlike a feature team where if you just give them a roadmap and features and if those things don't actually solve the business problem behind it, you can't hold the team accountable because they didn't come up with those features. So unlike that, we now giving them the problems to solve, we can now hold them accountable to the results. And what that really means is that if the first thing they build doesn't actually solve the problem, they don't stop. They keep iterating. They either change their approach or they do other things. So that's what we mean by an empowered product team. Now, like I said, in an empowered organization, you don't need less leadership to pull that off. You need better leadership. And that's what this is really about. I'm sure most people know who Andy Grove was, the CEO of Intel, but he was also a legendary industry CEO. He's actually the guy that invented OKRs. He started with the predecessor technique to that, MBOs, management by objective. And he really, because he had created an organization that was all about empowered product teams. And his idea, the idea of OKRs is then you need a way to assign work to these empowered product teams. So that's where objectives came from. They are problems to solve, and the key results are the outcomes we're expecting and we're measured against. So that's where they came from. By the way, that's why if you try to apply OKRs into a feature team organization, it's a big waste of time because they're a mismatch. But when you're talking empowered product teams, that's what they're for. But anyway, of course, he is, there are many great quotes attributed to him. He was quite the leader, but I love this one. What gets in the way of good work? It's really two things. The first is that people don't know how to do good work. The second is they may know how, but they don't really want to, or they're not motivated. So what we're going to do in this talk is really tackle each of those in turn. The first topic is managing. So it's also true, I'm saying I am having a little distinction here between management and leadership. And that's what Andy Grove was speaking to, the distinction. Now, of course, most leaders are also managers. But the truth is the mix changes a little bit. If you're a first level manager, let's say you're a manager of engineers or designers or product managers, then about 80% of your job is this, managing, coaching, and staffing. And about 20% is the other thing I'll talk about, leadership. On the other hand, if you're a chief technology officer or a chief product officer, it's really the reverse. About 80% of your job is leadership and about 20% is managing. So the mix changes as you work your way through and up an organization. But essentially, these are the two things that every leader does, lead and manage. So when we talk about management, that's primarily coaching and staffing. And of course, those two are very related. In terms of coaching, I mean, this is the single biggest and most important responsibility for every people manager. And honestly, I believe that no matter what the job, even if you're managing a sales organization or a customer success team, your primary job is to develop your people. But when it comes to product managers, designers, and engineers, this is extremely important because nobody is born knowing how to do those jobs well. You might have gone to several years of an academic institution to learn the theory, but of course, you got to learn how this is really done in practice, and that comes from coaching. So just to set your expectations, if you're a first level manager of individual contributors, if you're that first level manager, you're probably spending on the order of 50% of your hours at work working on coaching. So this is, and if you're not, that's probably a big problem. But as Bill Campbell, you may know, he's considered the greatest coach ever. He literally coached Larry and Sergey at Google. He coached Steve Jobs at Apple. He coached Bezos at Amazon. And literally, yes, coaching is not a specialty. You cannot be a good manager without being a good coach. This is the essence of being a people manager right here. And I know that I am the beneficiary of many people who spent a lot of time coaching me. And if I wouldn't have had that coaching, I would not have done nearly as much as I have been able to do. And sometimes it took me a while to get points, so they had to really work at it. But I eventually, it really sunk in. And I'm so grateful that I worked in companies that understood that coaching was the highest order responsibility of a manager. And so it's normal to do an assessment, to put a coaching plan in place, and then to coach on the knowledge, coach on the skills, coach on the context, which I'll be talking a lot more about in a minute. But coaching is the center of what a good manager does. Some of you may recognize Christian. He's a longtime friend of mine. I watched him lead product organizations at 2 major companies. More than that, I watched him turn those organizations around from basically old style feature teams to among the best empowered product teams, holding their own against anybody. And Christian is just he's a great product leader, but anybody who's worked for him will tell you his superpower is coaching. He literally can, anybody lucky enough to have worked for him, they can't stop raving about it. And anyway, I saw that for many years. In fact, I personally, for several years, worked to recruit him. And he is now a partner of mine at SVPG because he is so exceptionally good at this. But I love this quote of his: every problem is a people problem. And I really think he's right in our world. It is. And so that's how we get things going well, is we coach our people. And of course, coaching is very related to staffing. In fact, if you do a good job in staffing, you don't have to spend quite as much time on the coaching, but they are critical. In fact, that's a pretty strong statement from Bezos. And he, by the way, reiterates this point at least every year. But their approach to hiring has been and will be the single most important element to their success. And, there's a lot of key elements to their success. They are pretty good at really everything we're going to talk about. But he's claiming staffing is at the foundation of that. And it's hard to argue with him on that. Staffing is so essential. And this is another one of those things like coaching. A lot of times I'll talk to product leaders at companies and I ask them, what's your main use of time? Tell me about your job. And they don't even mention coaching. It's not even in the top 3 things that they do. They're far off. And they sure won't mention staffing. Because they view that's the job of HR. Of course, it's not the job of HR. It's the job of the hiring manager in a good product company to actually go out and recruit the people. Like I mentioned, I personally recruited Christian, and I have personally recruited probably on the order of 200-300 people over the years that I have worked to build a relationship with. Sometimes it starts as just a mentor relationship, just like, hey, do you want to talk about your career? I think you've got a lot of promise. Love it. Maybe one day you work with me, but if not, I don't really care. I want to see you do well. just starts like that. You have a coffee occasionally, and you start to get to know each other, and you see if you can't, steer some good opportunities their way. And eventually it's like, yeah, you should come join us. So that is how that's what a hiring manager does. They go out and recruit the right people for your team. And of course, interviewing, the hiring process, the onboarding process. And I was always told as a manager that I was essentially being judged by my ability to get people successfully promoted. And that's success. Because remember, as a people manager, your product is not your product. Your product is your people. So this is how we know we're doing well. It's not, in most companies, you can't just say, I promote you. You have to go get other people, other leaders, other peers to agree that that person has earned that promotion. So my job is to coach them to the point where they are ready for that. All right. And yes, making some hard calls sometimes when some people are just clearly not able to do the job. You need to fix that. All right. So that's coaching and staffing. Let's talk about the other side of leadership, which is strategic context. Now, that's the term that we use for this. At Netflix, they use the mantra, lead with context, not control. And they're really talking about the same thing here, what we call strategic context. And when they say not control, what they're saying is, you don't want to hire good people and coach these people and then tell them what to do. That's command and control style management. If you're going to hire good people, you want to push decisions down to them. You want the teams to make the decisions, to take ownership, to solve the problems. But it's also true that if you want teams to make good decisions, you have to provide them the context. If they don't understand the context, if they don't understand how the company makes money, if they don't understand the dynamics in the marketplace, if they don't understand the nature of customers that you have, they don't understand the enabling technologies, how are they going to make good choices? They can't. So the way you lead in a good product company is, like they say, Leslie Kilgore, by the way, if you haven't heard of her, she was one of the earliest and longtime leaders at Netflix. She's on their board still, but she coined this phrase, lead with context, not control. And I love it. And it's very much captures what we're talking about here. It's another way of saying, don't tell them what to do. Empower. All right. So what does it really mean? It starts really with the business mission and objectives, but that comes from the CEO, from the board of directors. That's pretty straightforward. This is the purpose of our company. These are the 3 big things we're trying to do this year. That comes from the very senior leadership. Most of the strategic context actually comes from the product leaders. And I should say, when I say product leaders, I should have clarified this earlier. I'm talking about the leaders and managers of product managers, leaders and managers of designers, and the leaders and managers of engineers, those leadership team. At the minimum, it's your CTO and CPO, those 2 key leaders. But they are responsible for this strategic context, the product vision, the principles, the topology, the strategy, the team objectives. This is their real contribution beyond coaching. This is what they do. They have to create this context, and then they have to evangelize the hell out of it. So let's talk about each element here of the strategic context. And I want to be fair. These are, each of these topics is a multi-hour topic, each of them. So I'm not exaggerating. It literally took more than 400 pages to describe these topics in the new book. So these are not small topics. But what I want to do is give you a high level, sort of 100,000 foot appreciation for these. So product vision is one of the most important artifacts really from the product leaders, especially the head of product. And it serves many purposes. It's I call it the gift that keeps on giving. But the idea is, first of all, business objectives are great, but that really doesn't say anything about our customers. That's for us as a company. The product vision is first and foremost about telling the story from the customer's perspective. How will it make the customer's lives better? And of course, one of the great things about a product vision is if you have 20, 30, 50 product teams, it's very hard to make sure they're all going in the same direction. The product vision is one of our most powerful alignment tools. That's why companies often call it the North Star. It's also why so many companies, for whatever reason, they don't understand what product vision is, and they do a separate product vision for every product team, which if you just think about it for 30 seconds, you realize is nonsense, but that's what they do. Now, partly what they're doing is they're feature teams, not product teams. So there is no one vision. They're just trying to please stakeholders. But anyway, on a product team, it is meant to unify. Of course, we want to make sure that we're giving meaningful work. The vision is so important in recruiting strong people because they want to work. Good product design and engineering people want to work on something meaningful. And it's the job of the leaders to make sure this comes across, which is why the product vision is a little different than the other things we do. It's more art than science. It literally is a persuasive tool. It's not meant to be a spec or any kind of, narrative. It's meant to be persuasive. And it's also meant to be emotional. It should be emotional. We work hard to actually make it emotional. That's one of the reasons we'll often create a prototype that shows it, but then we'll make a video of that vision type prototype in order to put a soundtrack on it, in order to use the camera angles to make it more compelling and emotional. You want to show how you're leveraging industry trends, how you reflect the company's values. Like I said, it is our best recruiting tool. Also, it's really important to realize that this product vision, it also drives the architecture. The engineers are responsible for the architecture, of course, but they need to know where we're going if they're going to build an architecture that can support what our products need to do. And in fact, I tell the engineers, if you don't have an up-to-date product vision, you shouldn't get started on the architecture. You should wait, because you'll end up supporting the wrong thing. You'll end up doing something where in a direction we're not going, or worse, build what we needed 5 years ago, not 5 years from now. And then, of course, it also drives the team topology, which is very important, and our next topic. There's so many great quotes around product vision. This one has always resonated with me. I feel like this captures what we're trying to do here with empowerment, but also that emotional element very well. So it's a famous quote. You've probably seen it before. All right, let's talk about team topology. So the team topology is derived from two things, really. One is the product vision we just talked about, and also the product architecture. Those two things kind of converge on a team topology. What a team topology is how do you structure your product teams? So if you're a little startup with 5 engineers, this is a non-issue. Your company equals your product team is just one team. But let's say you've got 50 engineers, which is probably on the order of 10, 15 product teams. How do you decide which product teams what each product team is responsible for and how they relate to each other? That is team topology. That is one of the most difficult but most important decisions product leaders make, is your team topology. If you don't do this well, you'll pay for it for years. And by the way, it shows up. How does it show up? Well, teams saying, every time we try to add just a basic feature, you have to go work with 5 other teams or 20 other teams. And it should only take us a day to do this, but it ends up taking us 3 weeks. Because we're not in charge of anything. We don't really have autonomy at any level. And so that what they're really doing is fighting their topology. Their topology is getting in the way of their work rather than helping their work. So what we're trying to do when we come up with a team topology is maximize for this sense of ownership. You want each team to own something meaningful. That little graphic in there, which you may or may not be able to see, is just an example of a real company's team topology. This was a jobs marketplace company. So there was a job seeker side, people looking for a job, an employer side, and a platform side. And those were the actual product teams. You could see the names of the team, and from the name, you could get a pretty good sense of what they do. What they own. And then, of course, we want to maximize autonomy. No team at scale has 100% autonomy. Autonomy refers to, do you have everything you need within your team to make any change you want? Now, most cases, no. Most cases, you have some level of dependency, but that is one of those things where nobody has 100%, but if the topology is done well, you can do most of what you need. And the dependencies you have are reasonable dependencies. And then alignment. We want to make sure we're all going in the same direction. We're all working together, and we understand how we align to our customers, how we align to our business. So yeah, the phrase highly aligned, loosely coupled, that's another mantra at Netflix, but it's also a mantra at many tech product companies. That's what we're trying to do with our team topology. You know, I try to explain to leaders, there is no single perfect team topology, but there are lots of bad ways to do it. And I told you what it's like when it's bad. All right, so that's team topology. That is another big, and admittedly, that is one of the most difficult jobs for a product leader. And this is something where the head of product and the head of technology need to work this out together. It never works if it's one or the other. They have to work this together because there is a lot of negotiation involved. All right. Then, of course, product strategy. This is where things really start to get interesting. And in fact, this product strategy is often where the difference between good and great product leaders are, right here. Product strategy is really, if you've got, let's say we've got 15 product teams like that job marketplace company. They compete against companies that have on the order of 100 product teams, which is not that unusual for a large company, right? A good product strategy can help an organization that's relatively small have a bigger impact than a much larger organization. Strategy is all about getting the most out of the resources, out of the investment, the time, money you have. So strategy is very much about working smarter, not harder. Richard Rummelt, for those that don't know, he wrote my favorite book on strategy called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. But the idea here is, you will not get a good product strategy out of some MBA formula. It doesn't happen. This is not a canvas you fill out. This is not a little worksheet. This is a hard work. Real work. It starts with focus, deciding what's really important and all the things you're going to say no to. And then for each focus area, you have to get into the weeds, get into the data, get into the qualitative research, understand the insights that let you, what are really the levers that are going to help you move the needle. And then, of course, you need to turn that into action. You need to turn that into work. And that's actually our next topic. And then, of course, you have to manage that activity, but in a way that is not disempowering. So not managed by command and control, but rather managed by servant-based leadership, we would call it. All right. You all probably have seen this Steve Jobs quote, but it's really true. Focus is not about what you're going to say yes to. It's really, it's about saying no to everything else. So when we talk about focus, it's really about like 2, 3, maybe 4 important things. Everything else, not going to move the needle. So that is very different than the way most companies work. And so for those focus areas, we're going to leverage our people to really move those needles. Instead of what so many companies do, which is, it's actually got a name. It's called the peanut butter strategy, where you just spread your people evenly, but incredibly thinly across all these 50 different needs, and you end up moving the needle on none of them. So, and then of course, how do we assign this work to people? Well, we assign them with objectives. This is the real use, the intended use of OKRs, not how most companies do them. But if you want to know how Google or how good product companies actually use them, this is how. They're for the product teams as the primary empowerment tool. We don't want to tell people how to do them by giving them a roadmap. We want to give them problems to solve. And that is, that's really the heart of it. Avid is a product leader. She's actually in the UK. long time at Google Ventures, a very strong product leader. I tell her story and 7 other leaders' stories in the new book, but she sums it up right here very well. A leader should articulate what needs to be done and why, and then let the team decide the best way to do it. That's what team objectives are all about. We need you to solve this problem. Our conversion rate is terrible here, or our churn rate is too high here. We need you to solve that. Please go figure it out. And then the teams get to work. They use their skills to solve those problems. All right. So let me try to summarize. I threw a lot at you, and I admittedly, this is a very high level. Each of these topics are big topics. I mean, hopefully you can appreciate that. They're all big topics. But I also want you to realize that it's really not rocket science. These things fit together in a logical way. And that's what I want to try to summarize here. Product vision describes the future you're trying to create. So that's 3 to 5 years out, 5 to 10 for hardware, but it's out there. The team topology defines how you're going to structure your teams to go after that vision. The product strategy lets us decide what problems we need to solve. And then the team objectives are how we assign those problems to specific teams. And then, of course, once we've assigned a specific problem to a specific product team, product discovery is how they figure out a solution that's worth building, a solution that's valuable, usable, feasible, viable. And then when they have some evidence and confidence it's worth building, then they build it. That's product delivery. That means that they are building a scalable, performant, maintainable, fault-tolerant solution that they will QA test and deploy to the customers. So that's how these sort of 6 concepts work together. And leaders, the first 4 are the leaders, and the bottom 2 are the product teams. But that's how things fit together. The last thing I really wanted to emphasize here was that I have told you, I have admitted to you that the product leader job, hopefully you can see it's a very different job than at say a feature team organization, which is really just a facilitator. They still do some staffing. They don't do much coaching. They do staffing. And then they basically try to please as many stakeholders as possible. Totally different job. You can see it's a very hard job. I also was struck by, recently I gave a talk and some leader asked a question. She was frustrated because she felt like there was just no way to please all her stakeholders. And she was very guilty about that. And I was trying to explain to her, that is not your objective. If you're trying to please your stakeholders, first of all, you're not doing your job, but also it's not possible. If you would need to be orders of magnitude larger and you'd still probably fail. So it is not about pleasing stakeholders. Now, it's not about blowing them off either. We don't want to be rude. We want to be transparent. We want to be honest, but it is not about pleasing stakeholders. I love that Steve Jobs quote because he understood this very, viscerally. Yeah, if you want to make everybody happy, don't be a product leader. Sell ice cream. That's a much better job. But yeah, the product is, well, you heard him say it before, when you make choices, especially on your product strategy, there will be people that are unhappy. The best we can do is be very transparent as to why. Here's why we're doing this. If you disagree with it, let's talk about it. But this is why. There's nothing against you. It's just, this is why. We only have this many engineers. We only have this many designers. We need to make some choices about what we can really do. And this is, and we all would like to still be working here a year from now. So these choices we make matter. That's why product leadership is hard. All right. And then just to finish up there, many of you probably have heard of Inspired. Inspired was written for product managers and product teams, but it wasn't written for product leaders. And Empowered was written to share the practices of great companies for product leaders. So they are meant to complement each other. And I am certainly hoping that more product leaders will read Empowered and start providing the environment that their teams need in order to do good work. All right, Mo, do we have time for any questions? You're muted, Mo.
Thank you, Marty. Yeah, we do have time for some questions. Thanks for your talk. And I've pre-ordered your book, and it's a required reading for my students. And so really looking forward to dig my teeth in and write it right when it's here. Marty, I have a couple of questions that have come up. So you talked about the importance of providing context, that leaders have to provide context to their teams in order to make decisions. That seems very like easy to do or obvious, but why do leaders struggle with providing that context? What's stopping them? Is it just that they don't have the awareness that they should be, or is something else that stops them from providing that context?
Well, first of all, they have to agree philosophically that the right thing to do is empower their teams. And let's also admit, not all leaders are really there. Some leaders are like, you know what, I'd rather just tell you what to do. So assuming we're talking about a company where the leaders believe that over time, the best solutions, the best innovation will come by truly empowering teams, then okay, let's talk about it. Well, some of that strategic context is pretty obvious. If you don't provide a product strategy, if you don't provide a vision. There was a book that came out recently by Reed Hastings called No Rules Rules, which is kind of a goofy title, but it's really about the culture at Netflix. He was sharing how they built. And, Netflix is, by anybody's measure, pretty awesome. They really are pretty awesome. Now, the book, I do think it's a really good book to read. They take a very extreme position. If you talk about setting the dial on empowerment, they set it all the way to the end of the dial, very high on empowerment. It's not as far away as companies like Google and Apple and Amazon set it, as they sort of imply, but it's a really fun book. And one of the things that Reed shares is a story that I think is very telling to your question. He gave an example where, they believe this from the beginning. He believes this. He was a longtime early engineer. He gets this. But he said that there was one point where, you're CEO of a big company and stuff bubbles up. Usually not good things bubble up. And anyway, he heard about this decision that was made and he was like, what? Who would have made this decision? So, like a good leader, he gets on the phone and says and wants to talk to this person. He said, hey, I heard you made this decision. Can you explain to me your reasoning? And the guy did explain his reasoning. And of course, what in the book he's sharing, what he's thinking as he's listening is like, what an idiot. How could he have done this? But then he realizes, the truth is, based on the context as he understood it, that was not really an unreasonable decision. Mm. But if he had the context I had, he would know that's crazy. So he realized that the right answer to that is not, you're an idiot, let's get rid of you. The right answer to that is, what piece of context do I have that you don't? Because it's my bad for not sharing that context with you. And I really, that resonated with me very strongly. And I think that that is a sign of a good leader. That what is it that I'm not sharing? Maybe, because a lot of times, for example, one of the things, in the product world, we understand things like our customers and the data and the finance side. But for example, I've been surprised before sometimes by business development deals that have been done without any due diligence. And you're like, you find out later, it's like, they agreed to what? Oh my God, I can't believe they agreed to that. And you realize that there's context there that has not been shared, either with them or with me, us. And so, of course, the person with the most context is normally the CEO. They kind of see everything, and that's the view from the top. But in order to make good decisions, you really have to push that context down. And that's really the moral of the story is, be very aggressive by leading with context. And yeah, anything you know that might remotely be helpful, you should share it with those teams.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Marty. The next question is a more tactical question. I liked how you put, your vision should be compelling. It should be emotional. And your vision is what gets you to your North Star. Now that's interesting. And what if you have an organized? So do you have one North Star for a large organization, or do you think that different business units or different products should have their own North Star?
Yeah, that's always an important question. The general heuristic is that you want the vision to apply to as much of the organization as possible, up until the point where that doesn't make sense. So for example, at a very large company, let's pick Google, there's no vision. There's barely even a mission anymore. Organize the world's information. It's a stretch on several of those business units. But for example, does it make sense for YouTube to have their own vision? Yes. Google Cloud? Yes. Apps? Yes. Search? Yes. So those are each big. Each of those are bigger than most companies, right? So they're big, but one vision wouldn't make sense across the whole. But for most companies, they're not as big as Google or Amazon or anything. They're more like one business unit. And we do try hard then to have one vision that ties it together, because, the vision, a lot of the power of a vision comes from looking holistically at the problem. So for example, I was with a team the other day, which is just the mobile team. They were just responsible for the mobile experience. And we were arguing because they just wanted to do a product strategy and vision for mobile. And I'm like, you could do that, but how lame is that? You are limiting your company. Mobile should be an integral part of a holistic multi-channel experience. If you just do mobile only, you are basically putting up these guardrails around the potential of mobile for your business, for your customers. So I was pleading with them not to do that. Now, the reason they wanted to do that was because they didn't want to deal with all the rest of the organization. And they just had their nice little world, part of the world. It was a half dozen product teams. They go like, we could do awesome things. And they could. But my argument to them was the potential of what they could do with just those half dozen teams just constrained to mobile is a fraction of what they could do if they looked holistically at all the ways mobile could help the business.
Yeah, that's awesome. Loved your comment around when you talked about your strategy should not be peanut butter. Don't spread too thin, and and then in that way nothing works out. And if you want to beat your competitors that are double, triple your size, having a good product strategy is a great way to do that. So thank you for that. So, guys, product leadership is hard, and Marty has provided a blueprint for all of us that we can use through his book Empowered to make that, how to do that well. So Marty, thank you very much for your talk today, and thank you very much for our audience from listening from all around the world. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.